All right, time once again for another meeting of the Northern New England chapter of SABR, always held in concert with the Gardner-Waterman chapter of Vermont. Tonight, we have a very, very special guest that I'm very excited about. Gabrielle Starr grew up right down the street from Fenway Park. A lifelong Red Sox fan, she's cheered her Sox on while living all over the world. Gabrielle is the Boston Herald's Red Sox beat reporter and founder of the fantastic website, Girl at the Game. She's also a former Fan Shield columnist and editor for the Red Sox, Phillies, and Padres coverage, not to mention the former host of Locked On Red Sox. And I'll tell you what, it is my distinct pleasure to welcome Gabrielle Starr to Northern New England. Gabrielle, my new friend, how are you this evening?
Bruce, that was the loveliest introduction. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here with all of you guys.
Well, it's just terrific to have you. I know you are a busy young lady with everything that you're doing, because I see how many words you write in the Herald on a day's basis, my friend. And I'm actually amazed that you actually have the time to spend with us this evening.
You know what? I would much rather be talking baseball with other people who love baseball than writing about loving baseball myself, because as much as I love my job, it can be kind of lonely just putting the words out into the universe myself instead of having conversations and actual interactions with people. So this is a treat for me. I work remotely a lot, and or during the off season anyway, I work remotely a lot. So it gets a little lonely talking to a dog.
Well, you know, in that case, then I've got to say it. You've got to join SABR, my friend.
I would love to.
We'll have to talk about that at some point. So I invited Gabrielle in this evening to talk about the 2023 Boston Red Sox. So I thought that I would start by just asking her the question that's on everybody's mind here this evening. Gabrielle, tell us about what you think the Red Sox are going to look like this year.
You know, it's interesting. I keep trying to answer that question. And I feel like my answer changes minute to minute during the games, day to day, hour to hour. We had our pre-opening day spread in the Herald yesterday, which is like every year, the Sunday before opening day, there's a huge spread with different sections. This year, I had to write all the sections because we hadn't hired anyone else yet. We have now. But one of the biggest questions I pondered was, you know, are they going to be underwhelming or are they going to be an underdog? And it really, I think, can go either way. Much like last year, you have a roster where there's a lot of talent, but there's also a lot of question marks. And so the question is, which will win out, right? The talent or the question marks, the risks or the rewards. You know, is a guy like Corey Kluber, does he have a lot still left in the tank? Or, you know, is it just kind of circling the drain, so to speak? Is Chris Sale going to be able to be healthy to have a remotely normal season? You know, a lot hinges on that. What's Brian Bayo going to look like? Can Garrett Whitlock actually become a real part of the starting rotation? Tanner Houck has looked rough in spring training. He says he can flip a switch when the season begins. Can he? What's Rafael Devers going to be like without Xander Bogaerts? Is he going to be able to?
Yep. What happened?
You muted me.
Oh, no, sorry.
No, it's okay. I don't remember where I got muted from, though. Do you?
Justin Turner and
Devers,
and what's he going to look like without?
Yeah, can Devers live up to the pressure of, you know, being the guy on the team now and, you know, doing so without Bogaerts? What are guys like Justin Turner, Kenley Jansen, Adam Duvall, what are all these newcomers going to bring to the table? What's the catching situation going to look like? You know, is Ceddanne Rafaela coming up this year? What's he going to look like? What's going on with Dahlbeck and Duran? There's just so many moving parts with this team. It's kind of like looking at one of those, like Bert in Mary Poppins, the one-man band. You know, there's a lot, like he's got the accordion on his back and the cymbals on his legs and the, you know, mouth pipe and the everything. Are they going to make music, or is it just going to sound like a cacophony? Like, we're going to see.
So has the vibe been positive in Florida for this club? And I didn't mute you, but I noticed you went back mute. Oh, I see. Has the vibe been positive with this club? Do they feel like they can overachieve? Do they feel like they need another piece? What are the guys saying as they see you, on the field or wherever you might be in a day's time, and you want to talk to them? What are they saying to you? How do they feel?
I've just mute myself when you're talking, so that if she's in my lap and she's a little agitated.
Love pets. So. That's no problem.
Yeah. Say hi.
Everybody say hi to her.
She's a little agitated, so I just don't want her to be barking and disturbing anyone. It's interesting. When I got down there the day before pitchers and catchers reported, the thing that really struck me was, you hear all of these guys feeling like they have a lot to prove. They've got chips on their shoulders, right? Because nobody is expecting anything from the team collectively. And a lot of these guys that they've added are guys who are coming off of injuries, or they're older, or both, or they just have had, bad seasons. So, you kind of look around and it's like, well, nobody thinks we can do anything. So why the hell shouldn't we try to prove them wrong? And that's kind of an intriguing atmosphere to enter, right? Where you have Chris Sale, before he was allowed to start pitching against live hitters, the first week or so of spring training, he's like a caged animal. He threw his first bullpen and he's talking to me like, oh, if I could have faced live hitters today, I would have, if they'd let me. I want to face live hitters now. He's a guy who has basically not been able to pitch for most of the last 3 years. Yeah. Missed time in 2019 and 2018 too, making a ton of money. And he knows that he's kind of become a punchline, right? People joking about a voodoo doll, wrapping him in bubble wrap, all these kinds of things. Guy can't walk out of his house without the wind breaking his, face. I don't know. Like that motivates him. He's like itching to get out there and shut everybody up. And so on the one hand, growing up a fan of the team, I'm kind of like, hell yeah, like, let's prove everybody wrong. I love an underdog. David Ortiz was at camp. He's like, I like that everyone thinks we're an underdog because, then we're going to shock everybody again. Realistically, they took a lot of risk building last year's roster in somewhat similar ways. And look how that turned out. So is this going to be a repeat of last year, or is this going to be, you learned a little bit from the lessons of last year, and even if it looks like a repeat, it's not going to be a repeat? I don't know. The energy was good though in Florida. These are guys who feel good. They feel healthy. They're optimistic. They're fired up. You go down there, and if you love the Red Sox, they're saying all the things that you would like them to say. But now it's about doing all the things that you would like them to do. And there's not, sometimes there's disconnect between, actions and words.
So you just touched on something that I wanted to discuss with you this evening. You have been a fan of the Boston Red Sox now for as long as you've been around. And as I mentioned in the introduction, you cheered the club on all around the world. Could you tell us a little bit about the genesis of your Red Sox fandom, your personal experiences of traveling the world, and how you kind of held on to the Red Sox as you've done it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm actually a third generation Red Sox fan. And that's Ruby snoring in my lap.
We love that.
It's the best. She's like a little space heater. Whenever I'm cold, I just pick her up and she falls asleep in my lap. So my great grandparents on my father's side emigrated to America from Poland in the early 1900s, and they had two sons, my dad's dad and my dad's uncle. And my great uncle was born in June 1918. So he was an infant when the Red Sox won the World Series that fall. And God willing, he will be 105 this year.
Really?
So he literally waited like 86 years minus 3 or 4 months, basically. He is a lifelong Red Sox fan. When he and my grandfather were kids, they would go to Braves games, Boston Braves games, and they'd hang over the dugout and talk to an old Babe Ruth at the end of his career when he was trying to get the Boston Braves to make him the manager. And they kind of just were using him for the Bambino appeal, basically, to sell tickets. So they didn't want him to actually be the manager. So they would kind of hang around the ballpark, hang their heads over the dugout and just try to talk to Babe Ruth. So I've like Boston and the Red Sox are in my blood for 3 generations. My dad's dad would take him out of school to go to baseball games. They went to the World Series. They just like, my grandfather was just like, yeah, you can skip school. I don't care. It's the Red Sox in the World Series. Like by that point, 1967, it's already been a really long time. So I don't remember my first game. I don't remember like realizing when I loved baseball. It was kind of just like, this is what you do. This is what you love, because you've never known a life of not doing this and not loving this. I tried to ask my mom once, I was like, do you remember my first Red Sox game? And she's like, I think you were 1 and you slept through most of it. Like, she doesn't even remember. You would think, like, if I was a mom and I was taking my kid, I'd remember it forever. But there have just been so many of them, fortunately, that she was just like, maybe that was your sister. Maybe that was the game that she was asleep and it was her first game. Yeah, I've been a fan forever. And when I was a kid, we moved to Israel, and I would try to watch games, which is not easy because there's a 7-hour time difference. They're 7 hours ahead. So if a game starts at 7 p.m., it's like the middle of the night. And in college, I did my semester abroad in Israel in the fall of 2013. And for some reason, I have no idea why, our dorms actually got Red Sox games. And this was not like a Boston kind of affiliated program or anything. It was just Tel Aviv University semester abroad. But we got World Series, we got the whole postseason. And so for about a month, I was nocturnal. And I made sure I didn't have any morning classes. And I just watched Red Sox games by myself. There was only one other person from the whole program who was actually even from the Boston area. So I watched all these games by myself, starting at, 2, 3, 4 in the morning. And when Koji made the last out of the 2013 World Series, the sun was actually rising in my apartment, and I screamed so loud, I woke up the entire floor. And everyone was so mad. And I was like, I respectfully don't give a crap, because my team just won the World Series. So it's definitely easier now with the advantages of technology, but yeah, it's my team.
So we have a fella in here this evening who has heard you speak before. Merrill Cass is with us tonight, and he's a bit camera shy. He doesn't like to get on camera or talk on Zoom, but he's asked me to ask you one specific question, which you, I think, have heard before. He would like to know if you still feel the same way, and I'm going to put it in a certain way, if you still feel the same way about Fenway concessions.
We could have a whole Zoom just about the Fenway concessions. My God.
Now, we love to eat, so that's okay.
I also love to eat. And fortunately, now I will have the benefit of the Fenway media dining room instead. The Fenway concessions are a very funny thing for my family because, like I said, we're Jewish, and we're kosher. My family is kosher, like strictly kosher. So you cannot get a Fenway Frank kind of kosher. Not that I would really want one anyway. And I also became a vegetarian when I was 9. So in addition to being kosher, I also don't eat meat or shellfish or any of that kind of stuff. So like growing up, it was very hard to be at the ballpark. I mean, look, I acknowledge very much the privilege of being able to go to the ballpark, period. But when you're a kid and you see everyone else getting to eat all these different foods and you can't bring in your own food, but you also can't eat those foods. It's both frustrating and also kind of like upsetting, when you're little and you don't really understand, why, right? Like peanuts and Cracker Jacks were all great. And at least when I was a kid, the Cracker Jacks were still those big boxes where you were actually getting what you paid for. Now you pay like $6. The bag is like this, half of it's air, the toy is a piece of paper. It's all very weird. My biggest thing is I've been to a lot of ballparks and I just don't understand why in this day and age, the Fenway food thinks that it can be so, or the Aramark and the Red Sox think that Fenway food can be so expensive while also being so like uninclusive, not accessible for so many different kinds of people. They used to have a veggie burger. There was this corner stand at the end of the third baseline in the grandstand, like on the main floor of the ground floor of the concourse had like a healthy corner. They had those SABR to-go cup things where it was hummus with pretzel chips. They had a portobello mushroom burger, veggie burgers, veggie hot dogs, all these kind of healthy options, a fruit bowl, and everything was consistently sold out. And there was always a line. So that there was a demand. It's not like this stuff wasn't getting sold. Half the time I would go down there with my mom, the food that we wanted was already gone. And since the 2017 season, I have not seen a veggie burger at Fenway Park. So we're going on, 4 seasons, including 2020, I guess. They also then used to have a veggie dog stand on the second floor, kind of in the same area by Tasty Burger. There's no veggie dog anymore. So they've actually gotten less accessible with their food offerings instead of more accessible. And of course, for kosher people, like there was a kosher vending machine kind of right field grandstand area near the Fenway Kids Clubhouse thing. I don't know if that's still there, but the issue with that is that kosher food is only kosher if it's not prepared or sold on the Sabbath. So what if you have somebody who's kosher, but they walk to a baseball game and they want something to eat? That machine is not going to be on the Sabbath because it can't sell the food. So it's frustrating to see a team raise ticket prices, raise concession prices, charge me $6.25 for a water bottle, but you don't sell a veggie burger. Like every other major league ballpark I have been to, including the Oakland Coliseum, sells a veggie burger. I don't know. The Woo Sox have veggie burgers. They have kosher food. They have a wide array of options. I've been meaning to ask about it. Because Chaim Bloom is kosher, but yeah, it's pretty baffling, especially in a city that's so diverse as Boston, has such a large Jewish population. To go to the ballpark and feel like all you can really buy is French fries or like a soda or candy. If I was a parent, like I would not be feeding my kids that stuff, but you also can't bring in your own food and the games are like 3-4 hours. So what are you going to do? That you're kind of backed into a corner. So that is the short version of my take on the Fenway food situation.
So I'm baffled, right? Forgive me, I'm baffled right now because you said the phrase kosher vending machine.
Yeah.
Really?
It's like it's one of those kind of prepared food ones where actually the guy who owns them is the father of a classmate of my sister's from her high school. But it was like kind of like how airplanes, the food's in these, aluminum little things with like a foil or whatever. So you could get like a potato knish or a kosher hot dog, or I don't know. Those were kind of the options. This kind of like deli food in a thing. And so it would get heated up. The vending machine basically had a place where it would put kind of your food on a conveyor belt and heat it. It was called hot nosh or something. Nosh means snack in Yiddish. So you'd select your food and then it would put it on this heated conveyor belt to kind of warm your food. Then you would get your food and, whatever. So I would get like a potato knish. It was pretty good. Certainly not like Madison Square Garden where you can actually go up to the deli counter and get a real potato knish freshly served. But yeah. So, I mean, look, you have other ballparks have Shake Shack or, Impossible Burgers. Yankee Stadium has sushi. I'm not saying that you have to have anything crazy. I just am pretty baffled by the way that they've gotten less accessible while getting more expensive because the demand is there. Even if you're not vegetarian or kosher, maybe you're just trying to eat healthier and you don't want red meat and you just want a veggie burger or an Impossible Burger. Like people are asking for this stuff. Whenever I've tweeted about it, people are in agreement. So, I don't know.
You're kind of preaching to the choir, at least with me, Gabrielle. My wife is one with celiac disease. She is now also one with a thyroid condition. So one of the members just chatted, said, "Hey, Bruce, we're going to talk about baseball pretty soon, right?" Yeah, we have been talking about baseball.
I will say there is a gluten-free vegetarian stand on Jersey Street, and then there's one up in the Sam Adams deck called Ming's Bings, and it's like these kind of gluten-free pockets with fake meat and veggies and stuff in them, and those are really good. But that's literally the only vegetarian protein option in the entire ballpark. So,
right. Yeah, but to shorten up my comment, that's why we haven't been to Fenway in years, is simply because my wife can't go in there and eat.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
and that tells you a lot because
Yeah.
if you're not going to let people bring in their own food,
Can I ask
I
a
think
question? Is it really a firm policy that you cannot bring in your own food? Because I just discovered an article last week that someone posted in one of these Facebook groups about, they listed all the Major League Baseball stadiums and what their food policies were about bringing in your own food. And Fenway Park was listed as saying like, well, you have to be sort of cautious about it. There's no real policies. So you have to have everything like clear plastic bags and stuff like that. So I just wanted to confirm with you if this was a firm, like hard and fast policy, or if it's just a very vague thing, depending on who you get at the gate, I guess.
So I'm pretty sure you're allowed to bring in a sealed bottle of water if it's under a certain size. For food, there were times where honestly, I would put like a bag of like these sugar-free gummy bears into my coat pocket or something. If you tried to bring a Tupperware of spaghetti in, they probably would say something because they check everyone's bags. I think that if you were bringing like, a little bag of your own pretzels in and you had them buried far enough in your bag, nobody would say anything. They're not going to confiscate things unless it's egregious. But the fact of the matter is, if you're a family with kids, there's only so much food you could bring in without it being noticed. And the games are long enough that, before I was in the press box, I actually had a workaround where I would have one of my friends who was credentialed just bring in my food for me, and then just meet me on the other side of the gate and hand me my food. Because, I would want to bring in like a salad or, something vegetarian, and he would just carry it in for me because they can bring in whatever they want. But like, that's, you shouldn't have to do that. You shouldn't have to hand your friend like your sandwich just so that you can, eat something healthy in the ballpark without spending $30.
Yeah, I was surprised that there were so many ballparks that just said, sure, bring your own food in.
Yeah, I think the Mets are one of those.
I think they were on the list, but anyway, I just wanted to ask that question. Thank you.
Yeah.
It sounds like Charlie on the MTA. Do you know that Kingston Trio song?
Oh, I love that
through
song.
the open window, he hands Charlie a sandwich as the train comes rumbling through. That's funny.
I love that song. But you know what? Nowadays, they'd ask Charlie for $8 for that sandwich.
Right.
And it'd be this big. And if it was a chicken tender sandwich, it would just be one tender.
unmute yourselves and go right ahead if you want to use the raise your hand button or however you want to do it. But let's start Q&A for Gabrielle, and I'm going right to Carl Lindholm, who has the first question this evening. Buckle up, guys. It's Carl.
Don't buckle up.
How you doing, buddy? You're muted again. Carl hit the mute button on himself.
Bruce, I think you can unmute people.
Thank you. I just was saying that I got to leave at 8 o'clock, and I'm interested in food, but my goodness, I want to talk a little bit, and they're related, about Marcelo Mayer, and I want to talk about the Red Sox. The Red Sox, and I root for the uniform. You know, I was sad to see Bogey leave, but I'm interested to see if Yoshida can play, and I'm interested in see if Casas can play, and I find it quite a fascinating year. I'm into it, but I wonder if the Red Sox, for a big market team, are unnecessarily tentative. We're not getting. Kiki is playing shortstop because Story is hurt. We fear redundancy, unlike the Padres and the Dodgers and other big market teams. We don't want to have too many players at one position because we'll have to. I fear because we have to pay them rather. So are the Red Sox too tentative? Are they? Do the Globe critics have any value in saying that they're Tampa Bay North? Are they not behaving like a big market team? I know it's not my money, so I shouldn't care too much about it. But I worry that the Red Sox are just too tentative at this point.
You know, it's interesting because I'll try to break my answer down into a few sections. For one thing, you know, they do spend money. They consistently spend on the higher end of any team, right? They have gone over the luxury tax. I think the only team that's paid more luxury tax penalties is the Yankees since the luxury tax began 20-ish years ago. The question is, have they spent their money wisely? Mm-hmm. And there's plenty of evidence to say that they haven't, right? Pablo Sandoval, Adrian Gonzalez, Carl Crawford. You can even argue that the Dustin Pedroia extension was a mistake, even though it was a fluke. You know, he also had been hurt in 2013. Basically, he played hurt the entire season. But, you know, there's been, you know, the Chris Sale extension. You know, if they just wait until opening day 2019, he's clearly not right from the beginning of the season. Then there's no Chris Sale extension. You know, that's over $100 million saved right there. You know, they spent. The issue up until the Devers extension was, why are they only basically spending on these free agents who haven't proven themselves in Boston? And yet anytime they have a homegrown star who has proven themselves, who's won a ring, that's the guy that they're lowballing and either trading or letting walk, right? Lester, Mookie, Xander, you know, like, what do you have to do, right? The Yankees, meanwhile, have 3 guys on their roster with $300+ million contracts, none of whom have won anything anywhere. You know, they traded for Giancarlo Stanton and took on the majority of his Marlins contract. They paid Garrett Cole, and then they just paid Aaron Judge. And I mean, look, the guy hit 62 home runs, and that's amazing. I'm not discounting what he did. But he hit 62 home runs, and that team still couldn't make it out of the pennant round. So when he doesn't hit 62 home runs this year, because that's almost impossible, you know, and at 31 years old, it's not like he's going to Benjamin Button himself. There's something to be said for the fact that the Red Sox haven't given out these big contracts, because even without giving out these contracts, they've won more championships in the last 20 years than any other team. Right? So you could say, wow, all of these teams are paying $300+ million to try to do what the Red Sox have been doing without paying $300+ million. On the other hand, there's the what if of maybe they would already have another ring if they had paid Mookie. Or, you know, what's going to happen now that they don't have Xander, right? And there's also a lot to be said about, you mentioned the Tampa Bay North kind of moniker. it's also funny because the Rays actually did, for them anyway, they
They're pretty
spent money.
good.
Like they spent I think the Zach Eflin contract is the richest free agent contract they've ever given out, and it's like 3 years and $40 million, which is just absolutely hilarious. But they did, by their standards, spend money this season, this winter. You know, the Tampa Bay North thing, I go back and forth on it because on the one hand, like, things are different in Boston. You're all here because you know that, because I don't think that there are really Rays fans who sit around having monthly meetings about the Rays, because how many Rays fans are there, right? You know, one of my dad's best friends, his mentor, is a guy named Ray who grew up in Massachusetts and now lives in St. Pete's. And so he's a Red Sox fan and a Rays fan. And he has Rays season tickets. He pays $13 per seat per game to sit on the first base line in the first like 5 rows of the ballpark. He pays the equivalent of 1 beer for his seat as a season ticket holder in like Jimmy Fallon fever pitch-esque seats, but at the Trop. Things are just different in Massachusetts. Things are different at Fenway. Things are different in Red Sox Nation. And, you know, the biggest thing to me is it's not so much about how much they're spending or how much they're not spending as it is who they're spending on. And when you see a team that is so full of kind of newcomers, short-term deals for kind of somewhat random guys, some of them, and you see a guy like Xander Bogaerts going to the Padres, that is a bigger issue of losing this culture of championship and leadership. And, you know, like Pedro Martinez talked about this last summer, saying that, you know, basically every championship, there has been one guy who played with people who played on the last championship team, right? And currently, the only 3 guys from the last Red Sox championship team are Devers, Sale, and Ryan Brazier, somehow. You know, you're losing these links to guys who know how to win. And yes, they've signed guys who know how to win. Kluber, actually, Kluber doesn't have a ring, right? Cleveland, no. You know, Kenley Jansen, Justin Turner, Kike Hernandez, Adam Duvall. They've won rings elsewhere, right? But winning a ring somewhere else is not the same as winning a ring in Boston. Knowing how to win in Boston is different than winning somewhere else, even if it's a team with a diehard fan base. Boston is just built differently. So when you look at the way that they're spending money, it's not just about the numbers on the stat line, right? The numbers on the spreadsheet. It's about who is this guy in this clubhouse? Who is the guy that when the prospects, the top prospects, come to Fenway at the end of the summer for their, you know, to be honored, right? Like every year they give out awards to like the best prospects, and they get to come to Fenway and they get to do all this stuff. You know, the guy that everyone wanted to meet last year and the year before that and the year before that was Bogaerts, right? Cedar Rafaela wanted to meet Xander Bogaerts. Like, and that's the difference, is you don't have that when everyone on the team is like, oh, I thought he was playing for the Braves. He's here? Yeah, just a 1-year deal. If that's the majority of your team or the majority of your off season, you're building a team full of guys you couldn't pick out of a lineup, literally. And that's the Rays way. That's not the Red Sox way.
You think that Marcelo Mayer, I'll stop talking, I promise, is when do you think Marcelo Mayer will be ready? And the origin of my question is, are they waiting for him in order to align their infield the way it is? Story coming back, and is Marcelo Mayer the real deal?
I think it's too early to say. I think that he's really talented. He also turned 20 in December. So the question of whether or not he's the real deal when he's played something like 25 games at high A is just not a question that I think is even worth asking yet, let alone trying to answer, because about 10% of minor leaguers make it to the majors. A small fraction of those guys will actually last long enough to become free agents at the major league level. The idea that a guy who, just because he was the first round pick and, you know, is the #1 prospect, you know, when you look at their MLB pipeline page, and I'm not saying this to knock him or anyone else, I'm just saying this focus on prospects for the wrong reason is a huge problem. And that problem in part stems from the fact that the team at the big league level has been so upsetting and frustrating the last several years that people are just pivoting to like looking for something to cling to and hope for the future. So, you know, they did this with Bobby Dahlbeck, like that's clearly not panning out. Jarren Duran, it's not, now it's Tristan Casas. You know, you're pinning all of this hope that this guy, Brian Bayo, like that this one guy, just because he was the number 1, 2, or 3 prospect in the system, is going to pan out and save the team. One guy save an entire 26-man roster. That's not how it works. This isn't Michael Jordan saving the Toon Squad, right? This is baseball. It's a team sport. You know, it's Pedro Martinez in the 2004 ALCS saying, all I can do is go out there and pitch. I can't do anything if they don't score runs. You know, one guy is not going to come up and change everything. Not everybody is David Ortiz during the 2013 postseason, the like basic exception to this rule, right? I think Meyer could come up, you know, 2025. Maybe the end of 2024. But that's there. If this guy is as promising as they seem to think he is, they're also not going to rush him up to the big league level, because that would mean that then you gave away Xander Bogaerts, banking on the potential of a guy who didn't pan out. And now you don't have a shortstop and you lost your unofficial captain and you're screwed. And you know, and then the fan base revolts, right? Because even, I mean, Scott Boras even said this during Masataka Yoshida's introduction at Fenway. He basically hinted, he's like, you know, I don't think that they were too invested in negotiating with us because they've got a prospect who plays the same position. And that's a huge risk. You know, you've got proven players at the big league level. I'm never going to risk a proven guy who can win in Boston for the possibility of some other guy several years down the road. Never mind the fact that what are you doing in the meantime? Well, you've Trevor Story who's hurt and you're moving Kike Hernandez to be your everyday second shortstop. And he's never played more than, I think like 30 games as a shortstop in one season or something. I mean, like, you know, it's obviously hindsight's 2020, but if you just make Bogaerts the fair offer last March before Story, Bogaerts probably would have taken it because he wanted to stay. And then you're not dealing with any of this. And by the time Meyer comes up, you can move Bogaerts to DH or second base or first base or short or third base or whatever. And instead they're trying to plug holes as they come up. You know, I hope that Marcelo Meyer pans out, but I can't even think about it, you know, because I don't think it's fair to him either, you know, to look at a guy after such a short amount of time in his professional career at such a low level and say that this guy is, you know, anything. He looked good at spring training. That's all I can say. I mean, it's, you know, he played 25 games in high A. He's got, I don't even know where he's going to start. Probably high A again because he didn't hit as well. Right? Scott, I see Scott Green nodding. Yeah, 25 games at high A. They're not going to move him up to double A when all his numbers dipped when he got up there. So it's not a very hitter friendly ballpark in high A, but still. So sorry, that was my long-winded answer.
Andy Heckroth.
Hello. So I'm Gabrielle. I just want to say I'm coming at from a bit of an outsider's perspective. Since I am I'm actually a big Cardinals fan. So my memories of the 2013 World Series were, let's just say, not as great.
I'm sorry.
I am curious though. This year, this year's MLB schedule will be different since one team will play all the other 29 MLB teams. And I'm just curious, Gabrielle, what do you think? Do you think that favors the Red Sox, or do you think, or does it favor them. What are your thoughts about the new 2023 schedule?
Well, it certainly would have favored them last year because they were absolutely unwatchable against the rest of their division. I think they won like 3 out of 16 games against the Blue Jays. They also gave up a franchise record 28 runs in one game to the Blue Jays when I was sitting there in person, which is really fun way to spend your Friday night. It definitely would have helped them last year. I think it's interesting. I've always really enjoyed interleague play because I think it does a really good job of kind of uniting the league because there is such a disconnect between the National League and the American League, the different divisions, the different coasts, the time zones. You know, there's a lot of people from my days in living in LA when I would go down to Anaheim and pay for really cheap Angel seats to see Mike Trout. You know, there's a lot of disconnect between reading about Mike Trout, even seeing a highlight of Mike Trout or Shohei Ohtani, and actually seeing Shohei Ohtani in person being Shohei Ohtani or being Mike Trout, right? And it's funny because when I was a kid and I found out that Ted Williams hadn't been unanimously elected to the Hall of Fame, he got like 97% of the vote, right? I asked my dad, I was like, how is it possible that people didn't vote for Ted Williams? This is obviously many years before Mariano Rivera. So same thing for Willie Mays and Hank Aaron and, you know, Carl Yastrzemski and Babe Ruth, like all of these people, right?
Stan Musial.
And yeah, Stan Musial, like, you know, and my dad swore because he's like, people are bleeping idiots. And then he said, you know, and he's like, and also because some of the voters might have never seen Ted Williams play in person in their entire lives. So, you know, I think it does a great job uniting the game. In terms of divisional play, I kind of posited that maybe it will make these series a little bit kind of more heated, especially for the Red Sox and Yankees, because if we're being honest, the rivalry's gotten a bit stale. You know, only facing each other, 13 times a year now instead of 19. 4 series instead of 6, you know, it's going to be a bigger deal if the two teams are good, at least, because it's always better when, you know, they're kind of at each other's throats instead of one of them just curb stomping the other. Like that might help too. I'm not sold exactly on how it's kind of played out. I've got the schedule up right now because I've been kind of going through it. Marking the days that I can't work. But I'm TBD on how the schedule is actually going to play out. One thing I'll say is I haven't looked for other teams. So one thing I'll say for the Red Sox is I really like how many more day games there seem to be, at least in April or early in the season. Than there, at least it feels like there are more day games than in years past. Like the first week, I think it's like, you know, 5 out of the 7 games are 1 or 4 p.m. And like, that's nice. You know, I enjoy it. We'll see how it is. It'll be nice to not have to wait, you know, 5 to 7 years to see certain teams come around or to play them. That's really cool. Oh, sorry, my light. It's like bulb must be out. But yeah, I feel like it's one of those things where they need at least a season to kind of see how it goes, and then they'll make adjustments from there. Thankfully, it doesn't look like there's more than a couple double headers, which are an absolute killer for a sports writer.
Go to Dixie.
Hello, Gabrielle.
Hi.
Welcome to SABR.
Thank you.
I had season tickets to the Red Sox for 30 years, but I am not a Red Sox fan.
Oh, I'm enjoying this plot twist. This is why I come to these things.
It was a swerve.
My friends who are not SABR members always asking me about baseball because they know I'm a huge fan. Maybe they're not as big a fan as I am, but they asked me, especially last year, how are the Red Sox going to do? And in June and July, I said, listen, don't talk to me about the Red Sox until after they played the 2 weeks of games after the All-Star break. That's it. You will find out what they are in those 2 weeks. As I usually tell people in the springtime, you can sit back and enjoy the ride until Mother's Day. But before that, don't pay attention to anything, because until Mother's Day, it's all a joke. After Mother's Day, then you will see trends and you can decide what's going to happen. Am I correct in saying that?
I am inclined to at least partially agree with you. I will, sorry, I'm wearing this very fuzzy kind of Fenway green-esque thing and it's very warm. I half agree. On the one hand, I am of the opinion that it's important to come out of the gate on the right foot, right? Because it's a lot easier to build momentum than it is to dig yourself out of a hole. In 2019, the Red Sox started the season with something like a 9-game road trip on the West Coast, and they were terrible. I think they won 2 games. And they came back to Fenway for their home opener and their ring ceremony, and they were already an unpopular, kind of beaten down looking team. And in that game, in like the first or second inning, there were Blue Jays players stealing home against Chris Sale, and you could just tell that things were just not coalescing. So, you know, it's easy to say like, oh, like it doesn't matter until, in some ways, yeah, it doesn't matter. And you have time to make adjustments. You have time to figure it out. But you also have to take it seriously from day one. And, you know, like every game counts, right? A game in August doesn't count more percentage wise than a game in April. You know, you have time in April to get better that you don't have in August. But if you're good in April, that helps you in August, right? Yeah. But the part that I do agree with is, you know, looking at a player's stats. If you're looking at a guy's stats, a pitcher's stats, for example, from opening day to May 1st, and you're like, this guy has a 7.77 ERA, I'm not going to take you seriously because that guy's pitched what? 12 innings. That ERA hasn't ERA'd yet. It hasn't averaged out. If you're moaning about somebody's batting average, well, a guy could have a 500 batting average through 2 or 3 games because they've gotten a hit in half of their at bats. Does that mean they're actually a 500 hitter, or they've hit 500 over a very small sample size of games? That I'm like, okay, you kind of gotta, the first month or so of the season, you'll usually see me saying, instead of saying a guy's ERA, I'll usually say, you know, over X amount of innings, he's given up Y earned runs, you know, Z walks and A strikeouts. As opposed to saying this is his ERA, FIP, WHIP, whatever. Because you're just either going to give people the wrong impression from a positive standpoint or a negative standpoint by doing that. A guy could come up and pitch 3 innings, and if he gives up 2 runs, his ERA is like a zillion. Is his ERA actually a zillion? No. I mean, yeah, it is, but does it matter the way that you would think it does from looking at that stat with no context? You know, like Joe Kelly opening day 2018. I think he worked his way down from like a 72 ERA that year from that one game. So yeah, I 50-50 with you on that one.
All right, Walt, you're up.
Thanks for doing this, and hello from Maryland, although I'm a native New Englander myself. I'm very interested in how you came, as someone who did what you did 45 years ago. I started as a reporter and then moved into things like public relations. You've done it in reverse, and I'd love to hear your thinking and your rationale. I mean, you know, back in the day, and I used to be quite active in the newspaper guild. Companies would say, we'll get all of your good reporters when they get closer to 30 and have mortgages and spouses. Now, I'd love to hear your personal story, how you came around to being a sports writer after doing other things.
Sure. I think the biggest thing for me, and I'll be 30 in June, is I didn't get into this in a traditional way, and that's why it took me so long to get to where I am. I was not sure what I wanted to do when I was growing up, when I was in college. I majored in American history. I actually did PR internships in college and worked in kind of like, customer service isn't the right word, but I worked in the beauty industry kind of from a, like, I guess like marketing and whatever, interfacing with clients and stuff like that, helping with very luxurious, $400 haircuts and stuff like that. I always loved baseball, but it was never really, even though I actually had written some stuff about baseball for a history of Boston class in college, and got like high marks, and the professor even kind of sent the paper around to the class telling people that they should read it. Nobody ever actually told me that I should try to pursue anything in sports. And I'm hopeful that even though I'm not old, that it's not the case for women in college now, where if a woman shows an aptitude and passion for a sport, that it's just not thought of. Because I have guy friends who work in sports who had similar stories to me, and people were like, "Oh, you should totally work in sports." It's just, there's still kind of a gender stereotype there. So I ended up getting my teaching certificate instead, and I taught 2nd and 4th and 6th grade Judaics, Hebrew and Torah, in California for 2 years. And on the side, I was doing freelancing and blogging just by myself. So I was freelancing for sites like the Hardball Times, and I was ghostwriting, and then I was also running Girl at the Game, which is the site that I started, built from scratch myself. Was writing, I had guest writers, and I would edit all of their work, as well as writing and editing all my own work. I launched the Girl at the Game podcasts and had, amazing guests on that. I was hosting Locked On Red Sox for about 2 years, and also running their MLB social media for all 33 of their podcasts. I just kind of was doing any kind of sports job I could get. Basically saying to myself, I have to treat these things like full-time jobs while working full-time jobs, if I ever want this to become a full-time job. And like 2.5 years ago, Fansided recruited me, reached out to me, and they were like, "We love your writing. We really want to bring you on." And they hired me full-time. And that was technically, that was my first full-time job in sports. It was my first full-time salaried job in sports. I was full-time for Locked On because I had 2 jobs with them, but because I was doing 2 different jobs, they were technically able to make me hourly and not pay me benefits or anything like that. So I got to Fansided, and I was writing 3 to 6 articles per day. I was running multiple team sites for them and doing an MLB column for them, thousands of words every single day, and like set a bunch of records for various sites for them, carried those sites through the MLB lockout last year, and was finally doing the kind of writing that I really wanted to do. But the problem was the kind of caveat is that, to be able to write the way that you can write at a site like Fansided, where you can have no holds barred opinions, teams aren't going to let you in the room, right? If you want to write that Ryan Brazier is like a cat who inexplicably has unlimited lives, you can write a Fansided. If you want to be credentialed, you can't. And I'm not saying like, that's why I left, because it's not. But I've always wanted to work for a newspaper. And I've always felt like there's still a very outdated kind of distinction and stereotype about blogging, which is unfair because nowadays most people work at least partially from home. So even if you aren't a blogger, you're doing the same kind of work style as a blogger. But I always had strived to work for a newspaper, cover the Red Sox full time, and was able to get noticed by the Herald. And they reached out to me and they said, we have this position opening up. Are you interested in interviewing? And I had one interview with a recruiter. I had one interview with my now boss. And at the end of the interview, he said, we're going to offer you this job. You were our first pick. When can you start? And it was just kind of like, yeah, this is a paper I grew up reading and it's an honor.
It's a very 21st century story because it's not, you're basically going back to the old school journalism. I mean, coming from the new, I've got a couple of kids your age and they don't read newspapers.
Yeah.
And, I don't think most people get most of their sports news in the newspaper anymore. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I mean, I would say most of our traffic is definitely our web traffic. Our website is a lot bigger than the paper. Yesterday was our Sunday opening day spread, and I actually went on like a whole kind of expedition around my neighborhood just to find copies of the paper because it's not even easy to find copies of newspapers anymore. But I feel like it's also kind of special that I get to write for a newspaper that still has a newspaper before these things become completely web-based, because that was always what I wanted to do. But it's not easy to kind of get your door. It's not easy to get your foot in the door at these kinds of jobs, period. Yep. It's harder when you didn't start off, in college, like interning at a newspaper, or going to journalism school. And it's extra hard when you're a woman. And, people think, oh, well, is she going to be uncomfortable in the locker room? Spoiler alert. If I was on the other side of that as the player, I'd be more uncomfortable because they're the ones that are undressing, not us. But apparently it's the feminine sensitivity, right? So it's really cool for me to get to do this job and be a part of a paper that's been around for almost 200 years.
Thanks.
I'll go to Andy Heckroth in just a minute. When you got that job and you posted that on social media that you are now doing what you're doing, myself, I actually immediately went out and subscribed to the paper because I wanted to read your words in a more efficient manner. I get the e-edition, true story. I get the e-edition every day, so I get to see the paper and to see your words on the page as they are printed, not on the website. If you're catching what I'm trying to say in my clumsy language, it's good to see. For lack of better term, I only have certain vernacular here, so I'm going to probably be clumsy. You're the wordsmith, I'm not. It's good to see a brilliant young woman with a baseball mind get that much space in a paper like that and be featured the way you are.
Thank you.
We had discussions and presentations at SABR 50 in Baltimore from Melissa Lutke, who is obviously one of your predecessors, who is a fierce, fantastic woman in baseball. And I can only hope and imagine, based on the experiences you had in the hard road to hoe, that you're going to be that next type of person.
That is huge praise because I'm a huge Melissa Lucky fan.
She is fierce. I'll tell you, she was fantastic at the convention. And just to see, I just to be able to see your words in print. Now, granted, it's not it's not paper. You know, it's on my tablet, but it looks like the paper. That's a more fulfilling experience than just going to the website and reading it and trying to fight some of the ads and things like that. No disrespect, but
Yeah.
I want to see, you know, so this is thrilling to see you do this and do it so well and actually so fluidly, making it look just that easy, you know.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Happily. Yeah, I want to go to Andy Heckroth, who has had his hand up again. Go for it, my friend.
All right, thank you, Bruce.
Of course.
I'm just curious, Gabrielle. You mentioned that your first Red Sox game, you were very little and don't have a very good reflection on it. But I'm just curious, was there ever a game that you've been to at a Red Sox game or maybe another game with different teams? Is there a game you've ever been to that you distinctly remember? Like, I know that there are some members on here who've been to Game 6 of the '75 World Series. Was there a game that? Yep, as Bruce is waving his hand. Is there a game you can say? Game you distinctly remember saying, "I was there when this happened"?
Yeah. Well, I was at Game 3 of the 2018 World Series. Now the longest game in postseason history. Game 4 of the 2017 ALDS, when Rafael Devers became the youngest player in postseason history to hit an inside the park home run and the youngest Red Sox to ever homer in a postseason game. That was like an incredible kind of little crystal ball moment into the future of like, this kid is something special. This one's kind of random, but I was at the game when David Ortiz hit his 500th career double. And the reason that one will always stick out to me is because it was one of the first pieces of writing about baseball that I ever did just for myself. Basically, you know, just thinking about like, it takes a long time for someone to hit 500 doubles, right? Even someone as talented as David Ortiz. And basically just kind of realizing that at a certain point, he's gonna hit his last double, right? And just writing about how it felt to like have this moment of like joy and achievement, but also this kind of gnawing sadness of knowing that every kind of new height that he reached ultimately would lead to like a final peak and then goodbye. So for that reason, like for the personal reason of that, that was like a really kind of like special game for me. I don't know. I mean, I've been to a lot of, I'm really fortunate. I've been to a lot of really great games. I saw Pedro pitch a ton when I was a kid, probably some great games that I don't even remember that I was like, that game was the game that, you know, like Clemens and Pedro, my early years, Roger Clemens. But yeah, I mean, those postseason games were pretty incredible. The Kyle Schwarber Grand Slam in the ALCS in 2021 was, I couldn't talk for like 3 days. I had no voice. And the extra inning game from the round before, the Nick Pivetta relief game, which was like such a kind of Evolve callback from 2018, but Pivetta, that was electric. Yeah, I don't know. The one thing I kick myself about is that I could have gone to the wild card game, but I was so nervous that they wouldn't win and that the Yankees would be insufferable that I didn't go.
super cool. I was just curious since the Red Sox had some really great stars in the 2000s with Manny, David Ortiz, Pedroia, and Pedro. So I was just wondering if did you ever get to see those players live? That was what I was wondering.
Oh yeah. I mean, I saw, you know, Pedro, Manny, Nomar, Poppy, Keith Folk, Veritek, Trot Nixon, Johnny Damon. I mean, I was falling in love with baseball in the late 90s, early 2000s when these teams were becoming that team in 2004, and then that 2004 team, and then, you know, and so on and so forth. So, I mean, I remember when Dustin Pedroia was the rookie that stopped in the beginning of his season and then was rookie of the year at the end of the year. I've seen all of it. It's been incredible.
What else do we have for Gabrielle tonight? This is a rare opportunity to talk to a insider in Boston sports. You've left them breathless, my friend. Do you have any insight on any of the players that are down on the farm that are coming up yet?
Ooh. Somebody I'm really excited to watch this year would be David Hamilton.
Okay.
He stole 70 bases in AA last year, which is, I'm fairly certain, an organizational record. I don't remember how many bases, like the leading number on the Red Sox roster was last year, but I know that on the Phillies the year before, I think it was 13 stolen bases. And obviously the minor leagues are different, but 70 stolen bases, that's 1960s baseball right there. And I'm excited for the larger, even though I'm not a huge fan of the rule changes in totality for certain reasons, I am excited that at the possibility that the bases will induce a little bit more kind of that competition. Obviously, MLB is making all of these rules to sort of correct things that they have made the game become. You know, the game is slower and less kind of daring because players are scared to get hurt because of how easy it is for teams to just screw over their players and just find somebody else. So if teams were a little bit less like that, then there would be more stolen bases without having enlarged pizza box-esque bases, as Alex Cora is calling them. But yeah, I think it's really an exciting time for this farm system. I'm very curious to see how Brian Mata and Chris Murphy and Brandon Walter kind of do AAA this year, because there's been suggestion that any of them or all of them will get chances to debut this year. Cedric Rafaela is a superstar. I'm just itching to see him at Fenway patrolling the outfield, because he has the real potential to be think Mookie and Jackie Bradley Jr. combined. The outfield defense, the hitting, the speed. He can play shortstop too. His ETA is this year. I'm come on, let's go. Let's get him up there. I can't wait, and it's very clear from the roster construction too, because Kike Hernandez and Adam Duvall are only signed through the end of the year. So it's kind of okay, you guys each get 1 year, and then we got this guy coming up, and that's it. And he's out there, he's doing his thing for the next 15, 20 years. And Manuel Valdez from the Vasquez trade last summer hits bombs. I think he hit one yesterday, maybe the day before. All the games are kind of a blur, but he really incredible power, good defense. I think that he could be making his debut this year, especially if they need a little bit more power, in the lineup, which I feel like they will. So this farm system is interesting because the evaluating is kind of all over the place. Baseball America ranked them 10th. Keith Law ranked them 22nd or 23rd. Oh, I think my headphones died. Can you guys still hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But yeah, I'm very curious. Miguel Blaise is, way down at the farm, the bottom. He's 19, but he's like, they're calling him the right-handed rough.
Nope,
Oops.
I think you there.
Yeah, I'm here.
Good. Bill Nolan just pointed out that the bases have been enlarged to, I believe he said it was enlarged to 24 feet square this year. And Bill's a good friend and is on the board of directors. We're glad to have him here tonight. What is your take? And you mentioned this just a minute ago, Gabrielle. What is your take on the rule changes that have come about this year? We have talked about this. Actually, you and I have spoken about this on social media a couple of times. And I'm interested in your full take on what and why and what you think is coming out or is going to come to fruition with all of these changes. If you can mute, please.
A lot of other New England fans outside of Boston.
Sorry. My boyfriend's on an interview in the other room. Like I said before, the rule changes are interesting because, MLB is creating problems for itself and then attempting to solve them by changing the rules, right? They could speed up games by not having as many commercials, but then they wouldn't make as much money. They could, not make it so easy for teams to just get rid of players who get hurt. And then players would go back to sliding headfirst and stealing bases and being more kind of daring. But players are worried about getting hurt and losing money and getting cut and getting demoted and, having their spot taken. So they're playing it safe. As a reporter, I'm looking forward to games being shorter because it means that maybe I get home at midnight instead of 1:30 in the morning, right? As a baseball fan, I would love it if the people who are in charge of baseball stopped basically trying to sell the world a product while simultaneously changing it and thereby admitting that they don't think that their own product is good enough. Because to me, that's not really a good marketing strategy. If you're trying to sell me a carton of milk while simultaneously changing the packaging, I'm going to worry that you don't think that the carton of milk you're trying to sell me is good enough. And I'm probably going to go and buy milk somewhere else. Why would I buy a car from you if you keep telling me that the tires need to be replaced while trying to tell me that I should buy that exact car? The things that they're doing to change baseball, I don't think are going to attract new fans on the whole, because I highly doubt, and I've written this several times, that there's one person on this planet who said, oh, my whole life I've been waiting for baseball games to be 28 minutes shorter. And now that they're 28 minutes shorter, that's the only thing that was holding me back from being a baseball fan. A person who doesn't like baseball, doesn't appreciate baseball, doesn't care about baseball, isn't going to be swayed by these differences because they won't have seen the before or after to compare them. Why would a person be swayed by the bases being bigger when they didn't care about the bases to begin with? So the only person that you are upsetting or, frustrating with these rule changes is a person who actually cares about the game of baseball. So I don't think that it's going to grow the game. I don't believe that they think that it's going to grow the game. I'm all for pitchers working faster because there are pitchers who work too slowly. I'm not about punishing an entire team for a pitcher not being in their windup or in their throwing motion with 8 seconds left on the clock, because it's not the team's fault that the guy is slow. Never mind the fact that none of us trust umpires to begin with. So we're going to put this in the hands of the umpires. I'm sure that will go really, really well.
Now,
Just
we saw
like-
that incident today that you commented on social media with Real Muto getting tossed for dropping a baseball.
right.
What?
Or the sticky stuff, right? The pitching stuff. How are you going to change the baseballs every single year at the league level? Basically telling players, well, we're going to give you this kind of baseball for this series. We're going to give you this kind of baseball for a different series, right? There's all of this science and investigation that Meredith Wills does. She's an astrophysicist, and she does these every single year. The Yankees were getting juicier baseballs for certain series last year. So for one thing, Aaron Judge was getting prime meatballs to hit. Just putting it out there. But you've got,
Imagine that.
yeah, shocking, right? Somehow the Red Sox weren't receiving any of those, and all of their balls that would have been home runs were dying on the warning track. You tell me that JD Martinez didn't have a good year last year. I tell you that JD Martinez hit more doubles last year than the year before. So was he actually having a bad year, or were the Red Sox not getting juiced balls because they weren't as good of a team? Xander Bogaerts also hit more doubles last year than the year before. And at a certain point at the end of the season, he had more doubles in the same amount of games than he had the year before.
There's a whole big thing happening. Right
And a
now.
lot of those were balls that died on the warning track 3 feet away from being home runs. So which one was it, right?
Younger guys like-
If the league is just playing puppet master and forcing players to adapt to changes every single year, what it tells me is that the league is run by people who don't appreciate the game of baseball. And until there is somebody in charge, because it starts from the top, right? Until there's somebody in the commissioner's office who actually values the game of baseball for what it is, instead of how much money it can make them, this is just going to keep happening. You know, you're going to tell pitchers, we're getting rid of sticky stuff. You can have a rosin bag, and then punishing pitchers for not doing as well. Look, I'm not pro cheating. I'm also not pro taking away something that somebody might have used for the first 20 years of their professional career, cold turkey, and then saying it's your fault that you suck. No, it's your fault that you let this happen for as long as you did, and then just took it away overnight. If you don't want sticky stuff to be allowed, come up with your own kind of grip. Have it be a color. Have pitchers be allowed like a tiny little, capsule. Each inning, an umpire hands them the capsule. That's the only thing they're allowed to use. And if they test for anything else, they can get suspended, but you're going to just give them a rosin bag and then you're going to fault them when they can't pitch. You weren't faulting them for not pitching when they were winning the Cy Young Award 3 years ago with the sticky stuff, but now you are. I don't like how much of the game is actually out of the game level control nowadays, is kind of there's an unsophisticated way of making that overall point, but that is kind of the gist of it.
That's very interesting. I'm actually a proponent of some of the rule changes. I'm not terribly worried about the bigger bases, just because I've seen it in the minor leagues for several years now, and I think it's probably going to help with injury and whatnot.
Yeah, I don't mind the bigger bases because there's no penalty with the bases.
Right.
I mind the things that actually change the game, the way like the 3-batter minimum rule is the perfect example. You're going to require a manager to leave a pitcher in for 3 batters unless they're hurt. And you're saying that that's going to speed up the game. If that pitcher doesn't have it, they're stuck in the game for 3 batters, and you're actually going to prolong the game because by the time that guy comes out, maybe he's loaded the bases and you've actually got to bring in a new guy to clean up his mess. And the game's about 20 minutes longer because of that. And the manager can't do anything about it. How does that benefit the game? It doesn't. It actually makes the game worse.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Your take on that has given me pause to think about some of these rule changes a little bit more. I mean, I've enjoyed watching spring training games so far this year and seeing that pace of play a lot more crisp and whatnot. But now I wonder at what cost.
Yeah.
some
Well,
of the
can I
things-
ask a question? Can I ask a
Heather,
question?
go for it.
Why is it, I appreciate everything that you said about the rule changes, and I agree with you pretty much on everything. Why is the media, why are those sports writers not saying this stuff? Why are they not like coming out that, because I've been following the media coverage, and they're very into the whole rule change thing. Like from the first second, they were posting all the stuff that was like basically PR flack stuff from the league, saying, oh, this is perfect, everyone loves it, all the players love it, the fans love it. You know, this is like 3 days into spring training they were doing this. So why are they not calling it out like you are here?
I mean, I'm not sure who you're reading, so I can't really say. There are some people.
Let me phrase it this way. Can you point out some writers who are saying what you're saying?
I don't look. I get the Red Sox clippings, Red Sox PR, copies and pastes every Red Sox reporter's stuff into this PDF every day. And so I'll read those, but I'm not, I mean, I'm spending too much of my time writing to be reading every single person. What I will say is it really depends on who you read. If you read a paper like the Boston Globe, which is owned by the same person that owns the Red Sox, you might get some more favorable coverage. If you read MLB.com, you might get some more favorable coverage of Major League Baseball. If you read The Athletic, you might get a more honest take on what's happening. Or if you read me, there are plenty of people that are supportive of the rule changes for their own reasons. Players are supportive of the rule changes for certain reasons, or they might just be saying it because they don't want to get in trouble. There's also that. I have seen lots of fans against all of these things on Twitter. I don't think people care very much about the bases, but the pitch timer and the restricted shift, there's strong feelings about both of those things. You had Fred Lynn last winter when Joey Gallo was bitching and moaning about how the shift was killing him. And people are like, dude, you struck out 213 times last year. The shift was not your problem. The shift is a problem for people who put the ball in play. Fred Lynn comes out and goes, they shifted on Ted Williams and he hit over 400. You adjust. I like I said, I don't know who you're reading or who you're not reading. I've seen plenty of people either just reporting the facts of, in minor league games, the pitch clocks shorten the games by X amount, just putting the basic facts out there. I've seen people with laudatory takes, and I've seen people like me who are pointing out, this might go wrong, this might go wrong. I don't think that this works with this. I don't think that the league should be doing this. If you look long enough, you'll find a take for every single angle of every single story. But I definitely don't think that it's been universally praised, because I've referenced several, press releases and instances. Major League Baseball went to the Arizona Fall League and the Grapefruit League and did presentations on the new rules. And the only reason that they would do something like that, when they never do things like that, is because they're trying to do damage control. So even somebody writing about those instances, talking about it, reading between the lines, or I wrote about it explicitly, you're not going down and making PowerPoint presentations with a VP for Major League Baseball unless you know that people already don't like this and you're trying to get ahead of it, because they never do stuff like that. There was no presentation for the 3-batter minimum or the ban of sticky stuff. And they're going around trying to sell people like traveling salesmen on the pitch timer and the restricted shift and like showing all this stuff. They made a whole thing what fans want. And you know what? You look at the replies to that MLB tweet about this is what fans wanted, and not a single fans were like, this is not at all what we wanted. What we wanted was affordable tickets and not to be blacked out from 4 states away, and to be able to buy food that's not $30 at our ballpark. And we want, no more ghost runner, and we want you to pay minor leaguers. I don't know about other writers, but fans sure as hell were not praising any of these rules. Fans are like, why are you not listening to what we actually want? You're just trying to tell us, like, it's gaslighting. Fans are like, you're trying to gaslight us. I personally was like getting a real kick out of it. I'll try to find the tweet in question and I'll have Bruce send it around, but the replies were bold from people just absolutely pummeling Major League Baseball, though I do feel bad for their social team because it's not their fault that they have to.
Well,
Yeah, I want to pile on, and here we see the value of your public relations background, because having worked in it myself, you're absolutely right. One thing that, and I'm glad you mentioned it, there are so many sources for baseball information that people tap into. And I think a real lot of problems that we have in this country are based on people not considering the source well enough. You mentioned MLB.com, and I just want to pile on to say, remember, they're working. I don't personally think John Henry interferes in the news coverage of the Red Sox or the Globe much, if at all. Frankly, I think John Henry understands that all publicity is good publicity in the Globe. Otherwise, he would have fired Shaughnessy a long time ago. But both MLB.com and the one that personally irks me the most is the Players Tribune. Because the Players Tribune is the players saying, don't trust anything any media outlet says. We are going to give it to you directly from us, and we're supposed to believe it's unvarnished. I mean, it's public relations, and I think it is important for consumers of baseball media to be able to differentiate between what folks like you do and what folks like the Players Tribune and MLB.com are putting out there. I just wanted to pile on.
Yeah, the Players Tribune is actually part owned by the company that owns Fansided, my former employer. Minute Media is one of the owners of the Players Trib. I really enjoy reading those pieces.
If you read them for what they are, but it's like reading, to me, it's like reading an authorized autobiography.
I think
when I read a biography of a player, I like it a lot more if the player did not participate than if he did. Because he edits. He edits if he's got a role. But
I think it depends on the Players Trib article, honestly. If it's a guy who's retiring, usually it's a lot more honest and unguarded. If it's a guy during their career, it makes sense that they're going to try to protect themselves because it's just
because they are a brand.
There's just, it's self-preservation. I don't blame I don't blame anyone.
I don't blame them if they can do it.
For doing it. I think not everything's going to be ball four, right? Not going to get, sorry, my boss is just texting me.
Well, anyway, I think anytime that you have someone doing an autobiography, it's going to be edited in some way, because it's going to be filtered through the guy himself. He's going to edit his own story. And it's going to be filtered through whatever writer he works with. So just hope that it's a little more accurate than just.
I don't trust people to tell their own story, I guess.
I mean, it's kind of a double-edged sword, though, right? Because do you trust somebody else to tell their own story, and do you trust somebody to tell their own story, and do you trust somebody else to tell the story for them?
Yep. Well, there are good examples and bad examples, I think, on both sides.
I'd like to ask one question about the restricted shift. Time in spring training or talking with players, do you believe that any of the Red Sox players are revising their strategy based on the existence of a restricted shift? In other words, going to the opposite field or doing anything else?
pretty good at doing that. And
That's a really good question that I'm not sure that I have a good answer to.
It's really hard to be on the cutting edge and stuff. It changes so quickly and, you know, trying to like.
There are definitely players, I'll tell you this, there are definitely players who are there are definitely players who are going to benefit from the restricted shift in a big way. Sorry, my editor is just, there are definitely players who are going to like, you know, kind of benefit. I know David Ortiz is like, if I had restricted shift, I would have, you know, had a zillion more extra base hits. But one thing that's been really interesting is Christian Arroyo going the opposite way this spring, which he has not normally done a lot of in his career. He had some insane opposite field hits in one or two of the games where it was like, I had to actually go and look at his old stats and be like, does he usually do this? And the answer is no, he doesn't, which isn't even a shift based thing so much because one of them was like a opposite field home run. There's no shift required, but I think players feel maybe a little bit more emboldened by the restricted shift, that you kind of feel like you can take a little bit more chances and go a little bit bigger, go a little harder during your at-bats because you have a better probability of sneaking something through. And you've seen that quite a few times, both for them and for the people that they're playing. There's a lot that wouldn't have been a hit last year that's a hit this year. So I think that they're feeling like, hey, you know, we can kind of take risks. The downside of that is, of course, the other team can take risks too. So your defense has to be better.
Okay.
Well, this has been terrific. I want to jump in here. We're going to get everybody out of here. We've been at this over 90 minutes, and Gabrielle, you are fantastic. Thank you very, very much for doing this.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
I'm grateful. I'm in your debt. I'll be sending you an email offline here probably tomorrow to continue our conversation from earlier before the meeting started this evening. But hey, next week we have Michael Ortman who will be visiting us. He's going to be discussing his book, Opening Day 50 for 50. Don't miss out on this guy because he's got a great baseball tribute in this book, and it's really like no other. So on that note, Gabrielle,
Thank you, Gabrielle.
It's my pleasure. Thank you guys so much for having me.
you are terrific. I really appreciate it. We're going to see you again.
Anytime.
Soon. And everybody have a great night. Thanks for coming. We'll see you again next week.
Thanks, Bruce. Thanks, Gabrielle.
Thank you.